Hi, I'm John Tickles, and welcome to Remote RPGs. You know what really makes my day? Do you know what kind of game I want to play on my free time? A game where you play as a lone child faced with certain death. Now that's a game I can get behind. I have problems. Survival Kids, everyone! Released for the Game Boy by Konami in 1999, Survival Kids is a role-playing game, and this is where I have to say that this may be the furthest I ever stray from a typical RPG on this show. You see, the gameplay is more of a mix of The Sims and Zelda, if that does anything for you. So here's your disclaimer. This is not a traditional RPG, so if you're looking for that, then you may be disappointed. On the other hand, when are you ever not disappointed with this series? Oh, I'm hilarious! Like, comment, subscribe. Anyways, let's get into the epic plot of Survival Kids. Survival Kids follows the story of a girl, or boy, your choice, who's on a boat trip alone in the middle of the ocean with their dad. This trip celebrates the child's 10th birthday. And what does the child get to commemorate their 10th birthday? A knife. Thanks, Dad. Also, their ship crashes after a vicious storm, probably killing the father, and leaving the child on an isolated island alone, with only a broken radio, the knife, and a few other supplies. The kid somehow has to defeat the odds and the elements in order to survive in this harsh wilderness. Rated E for everyone. Man, and I complained about not being able to watch Power Rangers when I was 10, and I thought that was bad. Anyway, the characters in this game are barely characters, so that'll shave like 2 minutes off this review, thankfully. There are no real NPCs. You don't even get a volleyball or like a dozen other morons to talk to. The story and characters are as scarce as clean water on the island is in Survival Kids, with a pretty bare-bones plot about a kid trying to survive. Hence the title. All I can really say about the story is that I like how they didn't feel the need to overdo it. Survival Kids keeps it simple, but still pulls at your emotions through a lot of little touches, like a counter that shows how many days you've been on the island, or a few lines of heartfelt dialogue from our child protagonist here and there. The other thing I have to say about the plot is that there are a bunch of endings that are kinda dark, like depressing dark, which, again, I didn't expect from an E-rated Nintendo game with kid in the title. But that's enough about the story. Let's jump into the gameplay because that's where this game gets really interesting. Much like The Legend of Zelda, you run around the island with an overhead perspective, interacting with the world around you in various ways. The goal of Survival Kids is, believe it or not, to survive. You wander around the island searching for food, clean water, and other resources to help you get to the next day and eventually find a way home. You aren't really given direction, which may seem scary at first, but you are on a deserted island and that's kind of how it works. However, this is the untamed wilderness, so Mother Nature is going to be around to make your life a lot harder. There are a bunch of natural hazards to consider, like the rain, which keeps you from making fire, and of course, wild animals. Yeah, you gotta fight wild animals that suddenly show up a lot of the time. What's really cool about that is that the animals all have these interesting personality traits. Some animals are really aggressive, some only attack if you attack them, and others won't fight back at all. Using your trusty knife, and eventually other weapons, you can defend yourself against wild animals, or chase down innocent creatures because you're kind of a dickish 10-year-old. To quote Darwin, "It's survival of the fittest, punk-ass bitches," or something like that. The combat definitely reminds me of Game Boy Zelda, with your knife acting a lot like that sword. Except here, combat is more about where you position yourself, rather than agility. When you slaughter your foes, you get their meat, but of course you can't eat it raw. Actually, that goes for a lot on the island. If you just pick up and eat everything you find, much like in real life, you probably won't last long. For eating some things, it's trial and error. But other times, you just have to use common sense. You find a berry? Eat it! Berries are very good for you. You find a raw clam? Don't eat that shit without cooking it, idiot! Some grasses are good for you, while others paralyze you. So you just have to tread carefully to keep yourself alive. You see, like The Sims, you have these 3 meters at the bottom: hunger, thirst, and fatigue. The first 2 are pretty self-explanatory. Shove nutrients into your face hole. Food is easy to come by, but clean water is a little tougher to find. Thankfully, you can carry a lot of water in your canteen. Fatigue is a little different from these other 2 things. You see, the game moves around pretty much in real time. There's morning, evening, and night. By the time night rolls around, your character will be tired and some really nasty animals will come out. So when the evening comes, you should be getting back to shelter. This adds a nice sense of realism and danger to the game, especially in how only certain animals appear at certain times. Food will also expire and other things will happen depending on the time, so it's a nice little touch. Item management is a big part of your success, or lack of it, on this merciless island. You'll find a variety of items scattered around the island, which you can use to assist your survival efforts, or to make baseball equipment. Whatever you feel should be more of a priority. You have the ability to combine items together to create new ones, such as combining a flexible stick and lure to make a fishing rod, or putting batteries in an old radio. However, you can't combine things that you may think could work, like merging 2 sticks to make fire, or merging a nail and wood to create your own island paradise. This element of item combination did make things more interesting, and it made it feel like you were more of a MacGyver or Rambo, surviving in the wilderness using nothing but your wit and limited resources. In that same vein, space in your inventory is also pretty limited, so you should know what items to take with you when you go out, and what you should leave back at your cabin. The only issue I had with this item system is that it feels a little limited, because there aren't too many items across the game, but this is a portable Game Boy title, so I'm pretty impressed they did as much as they did. Speaking of some annoyances, this is definitely a trial and error kind of game at a lot of points. Whether it's figuring out where to go, what item you need and how to get that item, there's a lot of times where the game simply doesn't give you any direction and it can get frustrating. There's one point in the game where you have to make a long trip and you have to pack a certain amount of food items and water in order to survive this trip. Without that, it's game over. This can feel really harsh to the player, but come on, this is a game about a life or death situation, so I can let it slide. In my first playthrough, I missed out on a bunch of important items because you have to be thorough and experiment a lot. Again, this adds to the game's sense of realism. If you're on an isolated island, nobody is going to help you, nobody's going to tell you what to do, it's just you and your smarts and nothing else. So in that way, I can accept this game's lack of direction. My other issue with this game is the length, but again, I can't really complain about it. The game can be beaten within 2 to 10 hours, depending on if it's your first time playing, and this may seem really short, and the island itself may seem kind of small, but the multiple endings challenge you to keep playing the game in different ways. And it can even become a challenge to see how fast you can get off the island. See, at the end of every day you get a timer that shows how many days you've been there. I wonder if anyone has played right up to 999 days and the character has changed to look more like a teenager, or at least just starts complaining all the time. The point is that although there isn't a huge amount of stuff to see and do, the replay value and your own personal experimentation can compensate for this potential shortcoming. It is a portable game, and besides, quality over quantity generally makes things better. The graphics in the game are a pretty standard affair. It's not bad at all for the Game Boy, and there are even a few nice anime-like drawings that look neat and impressive. The music in the game is pretty solid. Although the tracks are generally short and somewhat repetitive, they always match the mood. The main exploration theme is my favorite piece. It always gets stuck in my head whenever I go hiking or something. In conclusion, Survival Kids is definitely a little gem on the Game Boy that deserves some more attention. Although there isn't much in terms of story or characters, the gameplay is unique, enjoyable, and well crafted, even though it can be pretty frustrating sometimes. It's a shame that this game hasn't been re-released because, although it's not a masterpiece, it's a great little title that will bring you a lot of fun. I recommend this title especially to Sims fans, Game Boy Zelda fans, or to anyone else looking for a simulation or RPG that doesn't require too much commitment. In any case, I'm John Tickles, and I look forward to our next random encounter.